My name is Clara, and I'm 47 years old. I was standing in the hallway of the nursing home, clutching a small brown bag filled with sugar free lemon candies, my grandfather's favorite, when I saw him sitting by the window. His hands were folded on his lap, trembling just slightly, but his face held that familiar warmth, that crooked smile that had once made me believe the world was safe, even when it wasn't. "Clara," he said, eyes lighting up as if he'd been waiting all day for this moment. "Tell me, how's your apartment?" I froze. My apartment? He smiled again, gently tapping his fingers against his knee, waiting for an answer, but I had no idea what he meant. I didn't own an apartment. I lived in a small rented room above a bakery, barely making ends meet after the divorce. There was no apartment. Never had been. I knelt beside him, forcing a smile. "You mean my room in the city?" No, he whispered, eyes narrowing like he was trying to focus through fog. "The one I gave you. The one with the blue curtains." I blinked. There was no apartment, no gift, no curtains. Just a broken bank account, 2 jobs, and a heart stitched together with quiet tears and long nights. He leaned closer. "You still have the keys, right?" I didn't answer. My voice stuck somewhere between confusion and something else I didn't want to name. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. He looked away then, toward the garden. "Your grandma picked the curtains, blue, like the sky after the rain. Said it would make you feel at peace." There was no apartment, but I couldn't tell him that. Not now. Not when he was looking at me with so much hope. So I lied. "Yes, Grandpa, I still have the keys." His hand reached out and touched mine. "Good. That place, it's yours. Your inheritance. We saved it for you." I felt a lump rising in my throat. You did?" He nodded slowly. "Everything else, the money, the accounts, they'll fight over it. But the apartment, it's just for you." That was the first time I heard about the apartment. The first thread of a mystery that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. It started quietly, like most things that end up changing everything. But it wasn't long before I realized this wasn't just about an apartment. It was about secrets, money, and a legacy built on silence. 2 days later, he was gone. The call came just after midnight. I had just closed the bakery and was wiping down the counter when my phone buzzed. I knew, before I even answered, I knew. The nurse's voice was kind, but I didn't hear much. "Just passed peacefully, and we're so sorry." I drove there in silence, my old car rattling like it might fall apart. The night smelled of rain, and something inside me had already started to break. At the nursing home, the hallway was darker than usual. His room felt colder. He was gone. I sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the empty space he'd left behind. There was a Bible on the nightstand, open. I picked it up. A verse had been underlined in shaky blue ink. "The righteous man walks in his integrity. His children are blessed after him." Proverbs 27. I closed my eyes. Children! I was the only one who still visited. The only one who remembered his birthday. The others had drifted off, chasing careers, chasing wealth, chasing anything but this. And now, I was alone. Or so I thought. The next morning, the lawyer called, said there was a will, said I needed to come in, said my grandfather had left me something. My hands trembled as I held the phone. "Did he mention an apartment?" I asked. There was a pause. Then a quiet answer. "Yes, he did." The lawyer's office sat above a shuttered insurance agency, tucked behind faded brick and ivy. The building looked forgotten, like everything else in that part of town. I sat across from a man named Mr. Hartley, gray-haired, thin-rimmed glasses, voice slow and deliberate. He opened a worn folder and placed it on the desk between us. "Your grandfather left very specific instructions," he said, tapping the paper gently. "He wanted this to go to you directly." He slid a small envelope forward. My name was written in his handwriting, familiar, careful, fading at the edges. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside, there was a key, a simple silver key on a blue ribbon, and a note. "Clara, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But you're not alone. This place is yours now. I pray it brings you peace, answers, and a new beginning. Just follow the address. And don't trust the banks. They'll take everything if you'll let them." My heart pounded. The address was in a part of town I barely remembered. On the other side of the river, past the glass towers and financial district, where old streets curled between forgotten shops and rusted gates. I looked at Mr. Hartley. "Did he ever tell you about this place?" He shook his head. "Only that it mattered, and that no one else should know about it." I left the office with the key in my pocket and a weight on my chest. The building was old, not falling apart, but worn, like it had weathered more winters than it should have. 3 floors high, iron balconies, green ivy trailing down the side. I climbed the stairs slowly, every creak of the wood echoing through the stairwell. The door was navy blue, apartment 3B. I slipped the key in, it turned without resistance. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and dust. There were lace curtains over the windows, blue ones, just like he said. A small kitchen, a couch covered in a white sheet, a table set for 2. The place looked untouched, like someone had been waiting for me to arrive. And then I saw it. A photograph on the mantel. It was me, but younger, maybe 20, laughing beside my grandfather. Behind us, the same curtains. I gasped. I didn't remember that day. Didn't remember ever being here. How could that be? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the table, turning the key over in my hand. What else had he hidden? What else had he saved? Over the next few days, I started piecing things together. The drawers were filled with old bills, canceled checks, and stacks of envelopes with unfamiliar names. One caught my eye. Harrison Bank and Trust. I opened it. Inside was a letter addressed to my grandfather, dated 15 years ago. "Dear Mr. Mason, we acknowledge receipt of your request to withdraw funds from the long-term inheritance account. However, due to account stipulations and family objections, a hold has been placed." I kept reading, each word sinking deeper into my skin. My grandfather had fought for this place. For me. And someone had tried to stop him. The next morning, I met the neighbor. She was watering a row of potted plants outside her door. Short, kind eyes, gray hair tied in a neat bun. "You must be Clara," she said, smiling. "He talked about you all the time." "You knew him?" "Oh, yes. He'd come here sometimes to check on the place. Said it was for his granddaughter. Said it was her safe haven." Her voice softened. "You look just like your mother." I flinched. My mother never mentioned this apartment. The neighbor paused, then lowered her voice. "She didn't want you to have it." "What?" "She and your uncle. They came once, years ago. Tried to convince your grandfather to sell it. Said you didn't need it. Said you wouldn't appreciate it." I felt a cold ache in my stomach. That explained the silence. The years of distance. The carefully edited stories. They'd tried to erase this place from my life. But he hadn't let them. Back in the apartment, I found a small wooden box beneath the bed. Inside, a pocket Bible, 2 old rings, and a checkbook. The last entry was dated just 3 months before he died. A transfer to a savings account in my name. I stared at it. How? I never gave him my information, and then I remembered. That old conversation, years ago, when I told him about trying to open an account but getting denied. He must have taken the information then. Silently, patiently, preparing for the day I'd need it. Preparing for the moment when no one else would be there. That night, I called my mother. She didn't answer. So I left a message. I found the apartment. I know everything. Why didn't you tell me? No response. The silence felt louder than any scream. The next morning, a letter arrived. No stamp, no return address. Just slipped under the door. I opened it slowly. Inside, a single sentence. Some things are better left buried. I kept the letter in my coat pocket, close to my chest. My hands shook every time I touched it. Whoever sent it knew where I was, knew what I had found, and didn't want me to dig deeper. But I couldn't stop now. I went back to the apartment and pulled everything out. Every drawer, every box, every envelope. There had to be more, and there was. In the closet, behind a stack of old quilts, I found a safe. Small, heavy. I stared at it for a long time before trying the only code that came to mind. His birthday. It clicked. Inside were 2 things: a thick folder marked trust dispute and a black and white photo. The folder held pages of legal documents, all signed, all stamped. The names leapt off the paper. My mother, my uncle, my grandfather. It was a case filed nearly 20 years ago, challenging the validity of a trust he had created. They had tried to block it, tried to seize control of his assets before he could give them away, including the apartment and the photo. It was of a young woman standing in the same kitchen I now sat in, pregnant, tired, but smiling. It wasn't my mother. It was me. I gasped, almost dropping the picture. The date on the back was scribbled in blue ink, May 2002. But I never had a child. At least, I didn't think I did. My legs gave out and I sank to the floor. The photo couldn't be real, but it was. I drove across town to see the only person who might know the truth. Aunt Lila. She wasn't like the rest of them. Never chased money, never played games. She used to braid my hair and sing hymns while she cooked. She loved my grandfather, even when others turned cold. When she opened the door and saw the photo in my hand, her face turned pale. "Oh, God," she whispered. "He kept it? What is this?" I asked, voice trembling. Was I pregnant? She pulled me inside, closed the door behind us. "Clara, there's so much you don't know. I need the truth." She sat down at the table, her hands trembling. "You were 17. There was an accident, a storm, a car flipped. You were unconscious for days. When you woke up, you didn't remember. What didn't I remember? The baby." My whole world tilted. "You had a son." I stared at her. "Number? No, I'd remember that. You were devastated. Your parents told you it was a miscarriage. But that wasn't true." She looked away. "They gave him up, behind your back." I couldn't breathe. "They sold him." That night, I sat in the apartment, shaking. The Bible was still on the nightstand. I opened it again, desperate for something. Comfort, clarity, anything. A verse was circled in red ink. "For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light." Luke 8:17. I wept. not just for the child I never held, but for the years stolen from me. The lies, the silence, the betrayal by my own blood. They had taken everything, and now they were circling again, like vultures over a will. I knew what I had to do. I returned to Mr. Hartley's office. "I want access to the inheritance account," I said. He frowned. "The one your grandfather opened?" "Yes, there's a problem." Of course there was. "The account's been frozen. Your uncle filed a claim." I clenched my jaw. "On what grounds?" "Says the transfer was coerced, that your grandfather wasn't of sound mind." I laughed bitterly. He was sharper than anyone I've ever met. "I believe you," Mr. Hartley said. "But the bank—" "Don't trust the banks," I muttered, remembering my grandfather's note. "They'll take everything if you let them." Hartley leaned forward. "There's another option, but it's risky." "I don't care. You'll have to fight in court, with evidence, with witnesses." I nodded slowly. "Then we fight." The court date was set for 3 weeks later. In that time, I dove deep into every document, every letter, every faded photo my grandfather had left behind. It felt like I was walking through his mind, piecing together the life he had built in secret. A life he had tried to protect. But secrets attract shadows. One evening, as I was leaving the apartment, I noticed the mailbox had been pried open. Inside, a single item sat waiting. A cutout from an old newspaper. It was a birth announcement. No names, just initials. Born May 18th, 2002. The hospital listed was across the state. One I'd never been to. One I'd never remembered. Whoever left it wanted me to know the truth. Or wanted to scare me. Maybe both. As the days passed, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being watched. Calls with no answer, footsteps outside the apartment at night, the sense that someone was always just out of sight. I told Mr. Hartley. He sighed. "Families don't just fight over inheritance, Clara. They destroy each other over it." I asked him to be honest. "How much money are we talking about?" He hesitated. "With property values, adjusted dividends, and account interest, close to $2 million. I nearly dropped my coffee. "And the apartment?" I asked. "It was bought in cash 30 years ago. Now, it's worth 6 times the original price." No wonder they wanted it gone. No wonder they wanted me silenced. I needed someone in my corner. So I called Aunt Lila again. "Will you testify?" She didn't answer right away. "I know it's dangerous," I said, "but the truth has to come out." Finally, she whispered, "He was a good man, Clara. He saved you from losing everything. I won't let them erase that." I exhaled, feeling the first real relief in weeks. The day before the hearing, I got a call from a restricted number. I answered, expecting silence. Instead, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. My mother. "Clara?" I didn't speak. "Please," she said, her voice brittle. "You don't understand what you're doing." "Oh, I think I do." "You're going to tear this family apart." I laughed bitterly. "You did that years ago." She didn't deny it. "You don't know what it was like back then. We were drowning in debt. The banks were after us. We had no choice." "You had a choice," I snapped. "You just chose greed." There was a pause. Then she whispered, "He's alive, Clara." My heart stopped. "What?" "I don't know where he is, but I know he's alive. I saw him once. He looked just like you." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I couldn't face what I'd done." I hung up before she could say another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the city breathe. somewhere out there. He was alive, my son. I had spent half a lifetime searching for something to fill the empty space in my chest. And now, I knew why it never worked. Because that space had a name, a face, and a future I had been robbed of. But not anymore. The courtroom smelled like old paper and polished wood. I sat in the front row beside Mr. Hartley, clutching the photograph of me, pregnant, in the kitchen of the apartment. The silence was thick. My mother and uncle sat a few rows behind, whispering to each other, their eyes flicking toward me with something between pity and disdain. The judge entered. Proceedings began. My uncle's lawyer spoke first, calm and rehearsed. Mr. Mason was not in a clear state of mind. The trust was adjusted late in life, with no family consultation. We believe undue influence was involved. I stared at the floor. Then Mr. Hartley stood. Your Honor, we'll prove Mr. Mason acted with full intention. He left behind not only legal documentation, but letters, personal journals, financial statements, and, most importantly, a key witness. Aunt Lila stood, hands trembling but her voice strong. She told everything. How my grandfather had hidden the apartment to protect it from family manipulation. How he'd written checks to support me quietly. How he'd asked her to keep the truth safe until I was strong enough to handle it. When she stepped down, the room was silent. Then I was called. I took the stand. My grandfather knew this family, I said, looking directly at my mother. He knew what they were capable of. He tried to give me something of my own. And now, they're trying to steal it. I pulled out the envelope. This is his handwriting, his key, his trust, his gift. The judge nodded. We'll take a short recess before reviewing the documents. Outside the courtroom, I sat on a bench, hands shaking. A young man approached, hesitant. Clara. I looked up, startled. He was tall, early 20s, brown eyes, familiar eyes. I think you're my mother. My whole body froze. What? He reached into his coat and pulled out a photo, the same one I had found, but folded and worn at the edges. I found this in my adoptive mother's box. I didn't know what it meant until 2 weeks ago. He sat beside me. I've been trying to find you. Your name was on a letter. Then I saw the court case in the local paper. I couldn't breathe. I was never supposed to exist. Not to you, but here I am. I stared at him, tears rolling down my face. What's your name? I whispered. Eli. I laughed softly through my tears. Of course it is. He smiled. You okay? Number, but I will be. I pulled him into a hug, and for the first time in 27 years, I felt whole. Back inside, the judge returned. After a few quiet moments, she looked up. The documents are valid. The trust stands. The property and assets belong solely to Miss Clara Mason. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just nodded. It was over, and everything had just begun. The apartment felt different now, not because it had changed, but because I had. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was calm, like the building itself had been holding its breath all these years, waiting for this moment, waiting for me to come home. Eli stayed with me that first night after court. He sat on the couch, his knees bouncing with nervous energy, eyes scanning the room like he was trying to memorize everything. You lived here? He asked. I shook my head. Not exactly, but he built it for me. He looked around. It feels safe. I smiled. That's what he wanted. We talked for hours about his childhood, his adoptive parents, the foster homes before that, about the day he found the letter with my name on it. The day he realized he didn't look like anyone in his family. I used to think I was broken, he admitted, like I came from a mistake. I reached across the table and took his hand. You didn't come from a mistake, Eli. You came from a storm, and storms, they don't destroy everything sometimes. They clear the path. He didn't cry, but his grip tightened, and that said enough. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail, then listened. I saw him, she said. I saw his face, and I knew what I did. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know I loved him. I just didn't know how to fight back then. Against the fear, against your father, against myself. She paused. I hope someday you can have peace, even if I never do. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, and then I deleted the message. Some wounds need time, and some need silence. I started making changes. The apartment had good bones, but it needed light. I took down the old curtains and washed them, then rehung them with care. I painted the walls soft cream. I filled the kitchen with smells of cinnamon and fresh bread. And I made a space for Eli. He came every few days, sometimes to talk, sometimes to say nothing at all, just to be close. We didn't try to name it. What we were rebuilding, we just let it grow, slowly, gently, like a garden in late spring. Then one day, I got a letter from Harrison Bank, the same bank that had tried to freeze the trust. It was short. Dear Ms. Mason, we regret the inconvenience caused and acknowledge the court's ruling. We are releasing all funds immediately. There was a check attached. I stared at the numbers. Enough to buy 5 apartments like this one. Enough to never work again. Enough to start over. And yet, that wasn't what moved me. It was the last line of the letter. Your grandfather's legacy remains intact. I cried for an hour, not for the money, but because someone, somewhere, had finally said it out loud. I didn't quit my jobs right away. Even with the inheritance, I still showed up at the bakery every morning, tying my apron before the sun rose, kneading dough like I had for years. Routine gave me peace. Familiar motions, warm ovens, the sound of customers laughing through the open windows. It reminded me that wealth didn't erase pain. It just gave you space to breathe through it. Eli started helping on weekends. At first just deliveries, then prepping in the back, then learning the register. He was fast, kind, and people loved him. One afternoon, after closing, he leaned against the counter and asked, "Why do you still do this? You don't need the money." I wiped my hands on a towel because it reminds me of who I am, before the courtrooms, before the lies. This place, it's real. He nodded slowly. Then maybe I'll keep showing up. I smiled. I'd like that. I began investing carefully. I met with a financial advisor, Mr. Hartley recommended. Someone not tied to the family, someone clean. Together, we created a plan. Some for Eli, some in secure bonds, a portion in property repair, and a modest account for emergencies. But I also did something else. I walked into the bank, Harrison Bank, and closed every account. The clerk was surprised. May I ask why? I smiled politely. Because I'm done trusting places that once tried to erase me. I left the building with my shoulders square, and for the first time in years, I felt in control. Spring came quickly that year. The apartment bloomed. I added flowers to the windows, repainted the balcony, replaced the rusted railing with something strong. The neighbors noticed. "You've brought life back to this place," said Mrs. Doyle from across the hall. "I think it brought life back to me," I replied. At night, I'd sit on the balcony with a cup of tea, watching the lights across the river. Sometimes Eli would join me. Sometimes he wouldn't. But I was never lonely. Not anymore. One Sunday morning, I found a folded note tucked into the Bible. Not in my grandfather's handwriting. It was Aunt Lila's. I found this years ago and never had the courage to read it. Maybe now's the time. Inside, a single page in my grandfather's careful script. "To my Clara, you are the strongest person I know. You may not see it now, but you will. When the world forgets you, remember, God does not. I didn't save this place for wealth. I saved it for healing. And when the day comes that you stand in it, not with grief, but with gratitude, then I'll know I did right. With all my love, Grandpa." I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. Gratitude. Yes, I had finally arrived. One Friday afternoon, Eli came into the bakery with an envelope in his hand. He looked serious. "I got a message," he said. "From who?" He set the envelope on the counter. "From them." I opened it. Inside was a letter, typewritten, precise. "We understand you've reconnected with your biological mother. For the sake of everyone involved, we suggest you reconsider future contact. There are things you don't know, things better left buried." There it was again, the same phrase. I clenched my jaw. Eli leaned forward. "What do they mean?" "I think they're afraid," I said. "Afraid you'll learn everything." He crossed his arms. "Then let's make them afraid." I stared at him. He wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man, and he was ready to fight. That night, we sat at the table, reviewing everything: the legal documents, the bank records, the letters my grandfather left behind, and one folder we hadn't opened yet, marked only with a red stamp, confidential. Inside were notarized statements, names, signatures, a web of transactions that trace back 25 years. And at the center, my uncle. Shell companies, property flips, false debts written off in my grandfather's name. It was worse than we thought. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. "Can we do something about this?" Eli asked. I nodded. "We don't just have proof. We have motive." Mr. Hartley confirmed it. "This is enough to bring charges," he said, "but it won't be easy." "I'm not looking for easy," I replied. "I'm looking for justice." I called my uncle, told him we needed to talk. He agreed, but asked to meet in a public place. We met at a quiet park near the edge of town. He looked older, smaller than I remembered. "You got what you wanted," he said. "Why keep digging?" "Because you took what wasn't yours." For years, he shrugged. "That money saved us. You don't understand." "You're right," I said. "I don't understand stealing from your own father." He scoffed. He was senile, confused. I pulled out the folder. "Not confused enough to sign all this. You forged some of these, didn't you?" He went pale. "Walk away, Clara," he said. "Be smart." I stood slowly. "You don't get to threaten me anymore." Then I walked away and called the authorities. The next morning, a detective arrived at the apartment to collect the documents. He promised they'd begin the investigation immediately. As I closed the door, Eli stood behind me. "You're really going through with this?" "Yes," he nodded. "Then so am I." We weren't running anymore. We were facing it all. Together. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. I was restocking the shelves in the bakery when two plainclothes officers entered the shop. Their eyes found mine, then scanned the room. Clara Mason? Yes. We need to speak with you privately. They showed their badges. In the back room, they laid it all out. We have reason to believe your uncle and mother were involved in financial fraud, inheritance manipulation, and falsification of legal documents over a span of 20 years, one officer said. I didn't flinch. We've frozen their accounts. A warrant is in progress. We may ask you to testify again. I'll do it. They nodded. Thank you for coming forward. You did the right thing. After they left, I stood alone in the kitchen, the smell of cinnamon thick in the air. The right thing. It didn't feel good. It felt necessary. That night, I found Eli on the balcony. He was staring at the rain, hands tucked in his sleeves. They came to my job, he said softly. Asked about me, asked if I ever received any suspicious payments. I didn't even know what to say. I joined him. I'm sorry you're caught in this. He shook his head. Don't be. I want the truth, even if it hurts. After a pause, he added, Do you think Grandpa knew how bad it was? I looked up at the gray sky. I think he knew enough, and I think that's why he left it all for us. Eli turned to me. You think he forgave them? The question hung heavy. Then I said, I think he forgave what he could and protected what he couldn't. A week later, the arrests were made. My uncle was taken from his office in handcuffs. My mother turned herself in, silent, eyes downcast. I didn't watch the footage. I didn't read the papers. I just sat in the apartment, holding my grandfather's Bible, reading the same verse over and over. The truth shall set you free. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired of secrets, tired of silence, tired of living under someone else's shadow.